recover, recycle, or reclaim. You should become familiar with these three terms: recover, recycle, and reclaim. These are three terms the industry and its technicians must understand. Technicians will have to contain all refrigerants except those used to purge lines and tools of the trade, such as the gauge manifold or any device used to capture and save the refrigerant. The Clean Air Act amendments of 1990 charged the EPA to issue regulations to reduce the use and emissions of refrigerants to the lowest achievable level. The law states that the technician shall not knowingly vent or otherwise release or dispose of any substance used as a refrigerant in such an appliance in a manner which permits such substance to enter the environment. De minimis releases associated with good faith attempts to recapture and recycle or safely dispose of any such substance shall not be subject to prohibitions set forth in the preceding sentence. This prohibition became effective July 1, 1992. De minimis releases means the minimum amount possible under the circumstances. Some situations requiring the removal of refrigerant from a component or system exist when the following occurs. 1. A compressor motor is burned. 2. A system is being removed to be replaced. It cannot be disposed of at a salvage yard with refrigerant in the system. 3. A repair must be made to a system and the refrigerant cannot be pumped using the system compressor and captured in the condenser or receiver. When refrigerant must be removed, the technician must study the system and determine the best procedure for removal. The system may have several different valve configurations. The compressor may or may not be operable. Sometimes the system compressor may be used to assist in refrigerant recovery. We will consider only the refrigerants and systems covered in this text. The following situations where refrigerant must be removed from a system may be encountered by the technician in the field. 1. The compressor will run and the system has no service valves or access ports. For example, when a unit like a domestic refrigerator, freezer, or window unit is being discarded. 2. The compressor will not run and the system has no access ports. For example, a burnout on a domestic refrigerator, freezer, or window unit. 3. The compressor will run and the unit has service ports, Schrader ports, only as in a central air conditioner. 4. The compressor will not run and the unit has service ports, Schrader ports only, as in a central air conditioner. 5. The compressor will run and the system has some service valves. For example, a residential air conditioning system with liquid and suction line isolation valves in the line set. 6. The compressor will not run and the system has some service valves. For example, a residential air conditioning system with liquid and suction line isolation valves in the line set. 7. The compressor will run and the system has a complete set of service valves. For example, a refrigeration system. 8. The compressor will not run and the system has a complete set of service valves. For example, a refrigeration system. 9. A heat pump with any combination of service valves. When the technician begins to try to recover the refrigerant in these cases, a certain amount of knowledge and experience is necessary. The condition of the refrigerant in the system must also be considered. It may be contaminated with air, another refrigerant, nitrogen, acid, water, or motor-burn particulates. Cross-contamination to other systems must never be allowed, because it can cause damage to the system into which the contaminated refrigerant is transferred. This damage may occur slowly and may not be known for long periods of time. Warranties of compressors and systems may be voided if contamination can be proven. Food loss from inoperative refrigeration systems and money loss in places of business when the air conditioning system is off can be a result. Recover refrigerant. To remove refrigerant in any condition from a system and store it in an external container without necessarily testing or processing it in any way is the EPA's definition of recovering refrigerant. This refrigerant may be contaminated with air, another refrigerant, nitrogen, acid, water, or motor-burn particulates. In fact, An industry recycling guideline, IRG2, states that the only way recovered refrigerant can change hands from one owner to another is when it is brought up, cleaned or known to be cleaned, to the Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Institute, ARI, standard 700 purity levels by an independent EPA-certified testing agency. It must also remain in the contractor's custody and control. If the refrigerant is to be put back into the same owner's equipment, the recycled refrigerant must meet the maximum contaminant levels listed in Figure 9-17. The purity levels in Figure 9-17 can be reached by field recycling and testing, followed by documentation. Another option is to send the refrigerant to a certified refrigerant reclaimer. The following are 4 options for handling recovered refrigerant. Charge the recovered refrigerant back into the same owner's equipment without recycling it. Recycle the recovered refrigerant and charge it back into the same system or back into another system owned by the same person or company. Recycle the refrigerant to ARI 700 standards before reusing it in another owner's equipment. The refrigerant must remain in the original contractor's custody and control at all times from recovery through recycling and reuse. Send the recovered refrigerant to a certified reclaimer. If the technician is removing the refrigerant from the system and it is operable, it may be charged back into the system. For example, assume a system has no service valves and a leak occurs. The remaining refrigerant may be recovered and reused in this system only. It may not be sold to another customer without meeting the ARI 700 specification standard. Analysis of the refrigerant to the ARI 700 standard may be performed only by a qualified chemical laboratory. This test is expensive and is usually performed only on larger volumes of refrigerant. Some owners of multiple equipment may reuse refrigerant in another unit they own if they are willing to take the chance with their own equipment. It is up to the technician to use an approved clean refrigerant cylinder for recovery to avoid cross-contamination. Recycle refrigerant. To clean the refrigerant by oil separation and single or multiple passes through devices, such as replaceable core filter dryers, which reduce moisture, acidity, and particulate matter, is the EPA's definition of recycling refrigerant. This term usually applies to procedures implemented at the job site or at a local service shop. If it is suspected that refrigerant is dirty with certain contaminants, it may be recycled, which means to filter and clean. Filter dryers may be used only to remove acid, particles, and moisture from a refrigerant. In some cases, the refrigerant will need to pass through the dryers several times before complete cleanup is accomplished. Purging air from the system may be done only when the refrigerant is contained in a separate container or a recycling unit. A form of recycling has been used for many years. When a motor burn occurs and the compressor has service valves, the valves are front-seated, the compressor is changed, and the only refrigerant lost is the refrigerant vapor in the compressor. This is only a small amount of vapor. Dryers are used to clean the refrigerant while running the new system compressor. Often the system is started, pumped down into the condenser and receiver, and acid-removing filter dryers are added to the suction line to further protect the compressor. Figure 9-18. This recycle process occurs within the equipment, and normal operation resumes. A recycling unit removes the refrigerant from the system, cleans it, and returns it to the system. This is accomplished by moving the refrigerant to the recovery cylinder. Then, using the 2 valves on the cylinder, the recycle unit circulates the refrigerant around the unit and its filtration system. Some units have an air purge that allows any air introduced into the system to be purged before transferring the refrigerant back into the system. Figure 9-19. Reclaim refrigerant. To process refrigerant to new product specifications by means which may include distillation is the EPA's definition of reclaiming refrigerant. It will require chemical analysis of the refrigerant to determine that appropriate product specifications are met. This term usually implies the use of processes or procedures available only at a reprocessing or manufacturing facility. This refrigerant is recovered at the job site, stored in approved cylinders, and shipped to the reprocess site where it is chemically analyzed and declared that it can be reprocessed. It is then reprocessed and shipped as reclaimed refrigerant because it meets the ARI 700 standard. At this time, there is no way of testing to the ARI 700 standard in the field. When reclaimed refrigerant is sold, it is not subject to an excise tax, because this tax applies to only newly manufactured refrigerant. This tax saving is an incentive to save and reclaim old refrigerant.